And in that campaign, with the right candidate in the right setting, created an opportunity to reintroduce the whole country, to a politics of organizing, to a politics that resisted turning people into customers for finely targeted messages, that resisted turning people into clients for being served, but recognized people as citizens to be called to work together, come together, decide their future together. I love the word constituency. You know what it comes from? It comes from the Latin, and this is the Harvard bit here. Okay, it comes from the Latin. No, it comes from two words, together and stand, consare. It is to stand together. And what organizers do is transform communities into constituencies, people standing together to work together to take control over their own futures. Now, the campaign to elect Barack Obama, which is really what you want to hear. And I want to, where do I see the time thing? All right, okay, All right. The campaign to elect Barack Obama sparked a movement. It sparked a movement. Like earlier movements, it was rooted in shared values, respect, empower, include. It was driven by the creative energy of young people. It demanded personal and political change. It demanded confrontation with racial attitudes that for years have crippled our country, and an acceptance of civic responsibility that for years people said people didn't want to do anymore. It was focused on clear strategic objectives, electing Barack Obama, and it grew faster and deeper than anyone had imagined. And because organizing was at its core, it generated far more than a list of donors, potential donors, and a network of elected officials, funders, and campaign operatives. It trained some 3,000 full-time organizers, most of them in their 20s, and that is a long-term investment. It organized thousands of local leadership teams, 1,100 in Ohio alone. It engaged some 1.5 million people in coordinated volunteer activity in a campaign to which 13.5 million citizens contributed. And because this national campaign built from the bottom up, it built its own local organization, avoiding the goulash of interest groups and subcontractors and 527s and everybody's brother-in-law that had something they wanted to sell, after years of civic atrophy, our hope is that our country is on the cusp of an era of civic renewal that is desperately, urgently needed to confront the unprecedented combination of challenges with which we now must engage, including and beginning with the healthcare challenge in our country. I do have to say that when I came to immigration in Toronto, the immigration officer said, "What are you here for?" I said, "Well, I'm supposed to talk about the Obama campaign, the NDP convention." He said, "You know, we ought to be able to sue those people for slander down there. The way they talk about our healthcare system." And I said, "Wow, I am not on the Texas border now." So all right. So how did this happen? Well, there were three conditions that I want to explain that were foundational conditions, and then 5 practices. And I want to be as clear and specific as I can. The first condition was a story of hope. A story of hope. When Obama introduced himself to the nation at the Democratic National Convention in 2004, how many people saw that or heard that? Yeah, it was pretty memorable. It was pretty memorable. He inspired a nationwide constituency, but it was by telling a story of his own calling, reminding us of our calling as a people, and confronting us with urgent challenges to that calling that inspiring us to make choices that we had to make if we were to become the people that we wanted to be. It was a story of hope. And recognizing that many Americans sensed a moral crisis in the land, not just a political crisis and an economic crisis. His mastery of public narrative energized the audience around core values among Democrats that had laid dormant for years and years and years. Frankly, and with no disrespect, when I heard that speech, I was working on writing a paper, why do the Democrats keep nominating stiffs? And the core problem was that Democrats were afraid to bring the values at the core of what the Democratic Party was all about to life. Everybody was so caught up in the details of policy and strategy that they lost the lunch to the conservatives, who were very, very good at that. Now, Obama was able to return, in a sense, our party to values of equality, community, interdependence. And he did it by reaching back to the courageous and hopeful and loving choices that made him who he was, the choices we had made as a country when our better angels were, when we were listening to our better angels, and the challenges of, not the abstract challenges of policy, but the lives of individual people who were being daily compromised because of our failure to live up to our values, because of our failure to translate our values into action. Unlike most candidates who focused on the means of public work, the how, Obama reminded us of the why, of the ends of public work, why it matters, why it's important, why we have to take risks, why we have to sacrifice, and what is really at stake, and what it takes then in order to actually make a different world. It was a story of the possible over the probable. The possible over the probable. Maimonides, the Jewish philosopher, wrote that hope is belief in the plausibility of the possible as opposed to the necessity of the probable. Think about that just for a second. The plausibility of the possible over the necessity of the probable. To be a realist is to recognize that David does sometimes beat Goliath, that Goliath doesn't always win. And I'll tell you, if Barack hadn't realized that, there would have been no campaign. Because that's where Obama started, as hard as it is to remember. In January of 2007, nobody thought a black man with a funny name had a ghost of a chance of becoming president of the United States. So possibility is where hope lives. Of course, it wasn't enough to tell a great story about it. It had to be organized. And the second factor was there was no way that this campaign could be won without organizers on the ground. You can't win caucuses without organizing people. And I love these caucuses because people have to really go to them, and they have to know what they're doing, and they have to participate, and you have to develop leadership. And primary elections in states like New Hampshire and South Carolina, you don't win if they're very close without having organizers, people on the ground. So there were strategic reasons that connected the organizing to the winning, and I really want to make that point. It wasn't just that Barack Obama was a community organizer once. It was that it was necessary in order to win.